Good evening and welcome to the City Council, Norman Utilities Authority, Norman Municipal Authority, and Norman Tax Increment Finance Authority meeting of March 10th, 2020. Madam Clerk, you will call the roll.
Councilmember Bierman,
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here?
Sorry, Councilmember Carter.
Here?
Whoa!
This is a real council.
Okay, Councilmember Patron. Here. Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Wilson.
Here.
Councilmember Scanlon.
Here.
Councilmember Holman.
Here.
Councilmember Scott.
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3, approval of the City Council, Norman Utilities Authority, Norman Municipal Authority, and Norman Tax Increment Finance Authority minutes of February 25th, 2020. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
The motion on the floor is to approve the minutes. Council members, you may cast your votes.
All votes have been cast and the motion to approve the minutes passes unanimously.
Proclaiming the week of March 15th through 21, 2020 as Sunshine Week and Monday, March 16th, 2020 as Freedom of Information Day in the City of Norman. I'll entertain a motion to acknowledge receipt of the proclamation.
So moved. Second.
The motion on the floor is to acknowledge receipt of the proclamation. Council members, you may cast your votes.
All votes have been cast. Receipt of the proclamation passes unanimously.
A proclamation of the Mayor of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, proclaiming the week of March 15 through 21, 2020 as Sunshine Week and Monday, March 16, 2020 as Freedom of Information Day in the City of Norman. Whereas the Oklahoma Constitution recognizes and guarantees that all political power is inherent in the people, and it is the public policy of the state of Oklahoma that the people are vested with the inherent right to know and be fully informed about their government. And whereas it is the public policy of the state of Oklahoma to encourage and facilitate an informed citizenry's understanding of the governmental processes and problems. And whereas the purpose of the Open Records Act is to ensure and facilitate the public's right of access to and review of government records so they may efficiently and intelligently exercise their inherent political power. And whereas the Oklahoma Evidence Code presumes that there is no privilege to communication between a public officer or agency and its attorney unless the communication concerns a pending investigation, claim, or action, and the court determines that disclosure will seriously impair the ability of the public officer or agency to process the claim or conduct a pending investigation, litigation, or proceeding in the public interest. And whereas the Federal Freedom of Information Act requires federal agencies to disclose records unless they fall under one of 9 limited exemptions. And whereas the U.S. Constitution and the Oklahoma Constitution both prohibit any law that would restrain or abridge freedom of the press. And whereas these constitutional and statutory provisions reflect the philosophy that the government is us, we are the government, you and I, from President Theodore Roosevelt. Now, therefore, I, Mayor of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, do hereby proclaim the week of March 15th through 21, 2020 as Sunshine Week and Monday, March 16th, 2020 as Freedom of Information Day in the City of Norman. I would like to invite Michael Ridgway, President of Freedom of Information Act Oklahoma, to the podium to accept the proclamation and say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. It's a real honor to receive this tonight. It's a proclamation that I think expresses an attitude of the city that is welcoming to the citizens, that expresses an openness of government that I think that we all really appreciate. So on behalf of Freedom of Information Oklahoma and the citizens of Norman, I want to say thanks.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Item 5 is the consent docket. This item is, Councilmember Wilson, my
I'm
apologies.
so sorry. Hey, Michael. Thanks for coming. He drives from the very furthest east point in the city of Norman, and I appreciate all you do. Also, for you guys that don't know me, he's in my ward, and to have the, what is your title? President, chairman of the FOIA. I have to be careful. So anyways, no, thank you seriously for coming out.
All right. Item 5 is the consent docket. This item is placed on the agenda so that the city council, by unanimous consent, can designate those routine agenda items that they wish to be approved or acknowledged by one motion. I need a motion to place items 6 through 21 on the consent docket.
So moved.
Second.
The motion on the floor is to place items 6 through 21 on the consent docket. Council members, you may cast your votes.
All votes have been cast. Place items 6 through 21 on the consent docket passes unanimously.
Item 6, ordinance 1920-35 upon first reading, requesting closure and vacation of the platted 15-foot water line along the east property line for property located at 2437 West Main Street. Item 7, ordinance 1920-36 upon first reading, rezoning 1201 and 1203 West Boyd Street from R1 single-family dwelling unit to SPUD, Simple Plan Unit Development District. Item 8, ordinance 1920-37 upon first reading, rezoning 748 College Avenue from R2 two-family dwelling district to RM2 low-density apartment district with special use for an off-street parking lot. Item 9, ordinance 1920-38 upon first reading, rezoning the south side of East Lindsey Street approximately 1/4 mile east of 24th Avenue Southeast from RM2 low-density apartment district and RM6 medium-density apartment district to PUD, planned unit development. Item 10, ordinance 1920-39 upon first reading, amending the city code and the zoning ordinance in order to update city code licensing provisions and to allow for 3 tiers of medical marijuana processors as allowed by state law and to add definitions and other related provisions. Item 11, ordinance 1920-46 upon first reading, amending the city code to prohibit furnishing tobacco and vapor products to anyone under 18, providing fines and costs for violations, providing exceptions in certain circumstances, prohibiting possession of tobacco and vapor products by anyone under 18, notifying the Department of Public Safety for failure to pay fines, prohibiting distribution of tobacco and vapor product samples, prohibiting tobacco sales except in original packaging, prohibiting display or sale of tobacco or vapor products where self-accessible by anyone under 18, and providing notice of violations under sections 15-412 to the Able Commission. Item 12, Norman Rural Certificate of Survey for Miller Pines with a variance in the minimum acreage requirements and acceptance of easements, generally located half-mile north of East Robinson Street on the east side of 60th Avenue Northeast. Item 13, acceptance of a donation in the amount of $2,000 from PetSmart Charities to be used at the Norman Animal Welfare Center and budget appropriation. Item 14, Amendment Number 1 to the contract with the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, also known as ACOG, to modify the original grant application to allow ACOG to proceed with the remaining reimbursement of $108,620 of the original grant funding amount of $209,484 in public fleet conversion grant funding received in FYE 2015. Item 15, acceptance of congestion mitigation and air quality, CMAQ, grant funding from the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments in the amount of $84,148, approval of a contract and budget appropriation from the capital fund balance. Item 16, contract with TRT Enterprises LLC, doing business as Strategic Janitorial Solutions, to provide custodial services for the city's public transportation fleet for a monthly fee of $4,200. Item 17, City Attorney's recommendation that City Council approve a settlement of a claim in the amount of $20,449 for the Workers' Compensation Commission case of Cynthia S. Joy. Item 18, resolution appropriating $14,625 from the Neighborhood Park Land Fund balance for improvements to Sequoia Trail Park. Item 19, a resolution authorizing the city manager or his designee to submit a grant application to the Federal Transit Administration's FY 2020 Low or No Emission Vehicle Program and the commitment of funds for a local match. Item 20, resolution authorizing the acquisition of real property for the Porter Avenue and Acres Intersection Bond Project and declaring the necessity for acquiring the property for roadway purposes and authorizing eminent domain proceedings. Item 21, resolution authorizing acquisition of real property for the Creston Way and Schultz Drive Stormwater Project and declaring the necessity for acquiring property for drainage purposes and authorizing eminent domain proceedings. I need a motion to approve or reject the consent docket.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any comments from council regarding any item on the consent docket? Councilmember Patron.
So what was the final number? I'm sorry, what through what? 16 and 18 is the ones I have questions on. So one of them was the Sequoia Park, which I'm totally supportive of the project.
Yeah?
So my question's actually for Anthony, not for Judd. Mr. Francisco, I'm sorry.
Item 18, Anthony.
On the staff report on this, it had said that the, this is going off memory, but the gazebo was 14,000 coming out of the neighborhood park fund, and that any remainder, so we don't know exactly, there was not a bid or anything, but it basically was getting at the idea that there would be more required. And then it said that it would be coming out of the annual park playground equipment fund. And so I was like, I've never heard of that fund, just when I was reading through it. And I went to my budget book and I couldn't find that fund. Where is that fund?
That would be probably in the general fund park maintenance division. There is an ongoing budget for replacement of the safety turf at parks, replacement of broken playground equipment, that sort of thing. So I'm sure that that's where they may purchase some of those materials to supplement this project.
Well, do you know where it's at? Like, is it in the budget book?
Yes, now in the budget book, it would probably be at the summary level in the supply and materials category of expenditure. But in the revenue and expenditure report, which is by line item, we could certainly find the line items if you're.
Okay, I mean, I'm supportive of the thing, it's not, I don't wanna vote against it or anything, I just wanted to understand, because when it said it was an annual fund, and so how much is left in that fund, how much did council appropriate to that fund?
Yeah, again, I would
Councilmember
have to go
Trump.
back to the yellow book and.
Our
I
city
think-
clerk has something
I
to,
think the word fund is what's incorrect. It's actually an account, a line item account in Parks budget, not a fund. Not like general fund, park fund.
Yeah, I
They
would
said
suspect it's
fund.
in the general fund, park maintenance division.
No, I said account, she's right, it just said annual playground equipment account.
Yeah, I suspect that the word annual may be a bit misleading, but because the budget is adopted on an annual basis, but there is a line item budget for park materials in the park maintenance division within the general fund.
Okay, and by any chance, do we know, the reason why I'm asking is because a parks playground equipment issue that's near and dear to my heart is I would like to be getting ADA compliant swings at all of our parks. And so I'm wondering how much is left in that account,
Yes,
if we
ma'am,
could
and
get to work doing that.
Yes, ma'am, I can find that before the evening's over.
Okay, thank you. And the one before that was,
the janitorial services,
yes.
$4,200 a
janitorial
month.
services. Hi.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sean O'Leary, Director of Public Works and Director of Transit. So how can I help you, Councilmember Patron?
Thank you for coming up and answering some questions.
Sure.
So, reading through, there was two parts to my question. The first one was we took 3 different bids, and I can't remember the name of this company, but were they from a list of, in the staff report it said we had either a list of janitorial service contractors, or that it would come from, a disadvantaged business enterprise, BDE, something like that. So I'm wondering which one they came from.
We sought out all of the custodial services that were interested in this kind of work. As you might imagine, it is a rare classification of custodial work. In fact, we found very few companies that had ever cleaned a bus before. They cleaned buildings, they cleaned council chambers like this. Not too many bus custodial contractors out there. So we spent quite a bit of time seeking out all of the custodial companies. We already do business through Brenda Hall's office for custodial services citywide. So Brenda helped us with her bidders list as well. So we did a fair amount of research before we finally sent out the RFP, and there were 3 of those companies that responded to our request for proposal.
Right, and so the strategic is the one that we settled on, and I'm just wondering if they were from the list of janitorial service companies that are in our Rolodex, if you will, old school style, or if it was one, if they qualified to be a disadvantaged business enterprise.
I'm gonna have to ask Mike White, our fleet superintendent, if he knows that. I think we have a DBE, policy. I don't believe that they presented themselves as a qualified, disadvantaged business, or maybe Taylor Johnson can help us here.
Okay, and then I'll have some follow-ups after that.
Thank you. Taylor Johnson, Public Transit Coordinator. We also looked up ODOT's list of certified DBEs for janitorial services and sent that out. There were, I think, around 10, and Strategic was not one of the DBEs that we
Did
sent out.
anybody submit a bid under that?
They did. One of the companies was from that list.
Do you know which one?
I do. It is. I believe it was the
They're all three on here. I just,
Agape, I think is the name of it.
okay. Yeah, so the difference is like $600.
Right.
Okay, I just want to really emphasize that it's important that we really try to, if when we can, be contracting with those disadvantaged business enterprises. Like that, there's a real point behind that. So, I mean, I understand if it was the capital cleaning at $93.50, but if we could give, and I'm not saying not on this one, it's just henceforth, if we can really be trying to contract with those businesses. I think that's a really important program that we have in this city.
And that's exactly why we sent it to the list of DBEs. We want to make sure to give equal opportunity, and that's why the FTA mandates that we do that with all of our contracts as well. So we
Okay.
definitely want to be cognizant of that, but we also, like you said, want to be sure that we spend the taxpayers' dollars that they've entrusted with as efficiently as possible, and over the course of a year, we thought it would add up.
Okay. And then the second part of my question, you might want to stick around too, because I don't know which one of you. Coronavirus. In looking through these, this bid from Strategic, I never once saw disinfect. We're only cleaning handrails once a week. We're not cleaning seats at all. We're just vacuuming them. I want to know what our plan is when, you know, the daily stuff in there is not disinfectant stuff. It's mostly taking out the trash and if there's some gum. So I want to know what our plan is here in the city for, because this keeps coming up on the news, for Metro Transit is where the germs are getting spread. And
Just the nature of public transit as a shared ride, it's definitely, we want to be aware of that. You won't see disinfect, I think is the term you use, but you will see sanitize, I believe. I think it says sanitize the handrails. So, but we were told, I believe it was yesterday, that Strategic, they're on a temporary contract right now because we needed to get our buses clean, but they are going to sanitize the buses daily as long as this concern is out there. So that instead of the weekly, go to a daily sanitation along with
that
the other
answer.
daily. I'm sorry?
I said, I like that answer.
This to
Thank you.
help with the concerns and help us ease our minds as well on the city staff side.
Yeah, maybe the windows on the inside, I mean, things that we can do to cut down on bacteria or
Definitely.
pathogens.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Scanlon.
I'll talk to buses as well, but you can sit down. I just couldn't let item 19 go by without complimenting Public Works, our Director of Transportation, Fleet Maintenance, our bus guy, Taylor, in doing the spade work to look into a replacement bus that happens to be electric powered. I think that's a giant step. For us to apply for a federal grant to help pay for this puppy, we, the council, had to express our support of such a thing, and that's what we've done with item 19. I think it's a big deal, and I think it's maybe the forerunner of a lot more to come. So hats off to the work that you all are doing. Don't miss the suspense, which I think is the 17th, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. The motion on the floor is to approve the consent docket. Councilmembers, you may cast your votes.
All votes have, the consent docket passes unanimously.
At this time, I am going to let Councilmember Holman take over. It is my son's 6th birthday tonight. So, Riot, I will be home soon. Happy birthday, baby.
Okay, item number 22 is miscellaneous discussion. This is an opportunity for citizens to address council. Remarks should be directed to the council as a whole and limited to 3 minutes or less. Is there any miscellaneous comment? Please.
Cynthia Rogers, 633 Reed Avenue, Ward 4, yay, Ward 4. I appreciate, happy birthday. I appreciate the discussion earlier about the municipal finance bonds coming forward. I appreciate that we're talking about bonds and not sales taxes for all the reasons that everybody discussed. I feel like there were a lot of questions that people still had to ask that maybe council persons didn't get to ask, and I feel a little shortchanged, not just me, but my neighbors at home. And anytime the decision makers don't get to ask all their questions, I think that's particularly rushed. I would say that I'm very happy to hear that homelessness is being considered as part of quality of life, because that absolutely is a quality of life issue, and not for people that are struggling to find shelter, but for everybody in the community. So I believe that setting aside money and then determining what the best way to use that is completely appropriate. I will say that I'm very concerned about basically serving up dessert before we take care of our needs that we've been talking about, stormwater, municipal finance needs. I think it's a huge mistake. We did that before when we passed this thing to begin with. I had lots of conversations with then Mayor Rosenthal. I was like, I don't think you should do that. I think you should ask for the needs, because people will support Norman Forward because everybody gets excited about it. It's the sexy, fun stuff. Stormwater, it's not that fun. Municipal buildings, not that fun. So I think it's a huge mistake to ask people for money for what they want, and then in short order, we'll be asking them for money for what we need. You don't give your kids their dessert and then say, oh, now eat your carrots. It just doesn't work that way. I would encourage you to consider having the municipal bonds in June and then doing the Norman Forward in August if you get that stuff covered, because that's absolutely essential for our city to operate. Also, this is a big increase. The initial Norman Forward project was about $145 million, although we know we're not going to make that. $85.5 million on top of that is a 60% increase in spending. So this is just spending. We might like what we get, and people might want to do that. It's not a small amount. And then the economy is looking a little rocky, so I'd always be a little cautious when you're uncertain about the stock market, coronavirus. Anyway, thank you.
Be continuing the same discussion tonight, next Tuesday. So all the questions that didn't get answered tonight, we will have them in the queue for next Tuesday, according to the clerk. So look forward to that continued discussion on how we might move forward on the Norman Forward stuff. Please.
I really think this is something that people need in their lives. I think people need to have the physiological experience of receiving stimulus of some type, whether it's photons that are reflecting off of us or the audible sound waves that we change. We need to be in a position in which we are motivated and rewarded, chemically rewarded in our position, in our consciousness. and we need to kneel sometimes. We need to be on the ground. We need to sit in such a position that we can, whether it's with music or with philosophy or with our work, being able to singularly connect and then live and act, that's something that I think we all need just a little bit out of every day. And what's happened recently in the oil markets, please understand the seriousness of that and how it's going to affect the Oklahoma economy. You hear me talk about victory gardens and sustainability. Well, I've been talking about oil conservation, the way in which our sensibilities induce us to squander it. I've been talking about local food production for more than 10 years. We have had this opportunity, and it has been at hand for us to say, this is how we can politically transcend divisions. Urban agriculture, rural gardening, those country Oklahoma people, they're the deplorables. We're living off the land. We're hunting, we're trapping, we're doing the things that people throughout history have been doing. That's how we're connected to when America was great. America's always been great. America's an idea. I've been listening to a lot of David McCullough. Sure, as historians and readers, you've heard of David McCullough's work. I think David McCullough he's a failed utopian. He's like Bernie. You know, he's a failed utopian. And he's a failed idealist. But God, being an idealist is what we need. We need a Kennedy. We need somebody who's so righteous and committed and morally in such a position to inspire. You all are that for me. A lot of what I do outside of here to me. Building up these youth realms so that you can walk around. Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Evan.
Made to answer Councilmember Patron's previous question related to agenda item 18. The park playground maintenance fund is in the capital fund. It's an existing facilities project, so EF 0062. The original budget was $15,000 and there's $9,969.01 remaining.
Are there any further public comments? We will move on to council comments, and I will start with Ward 1.
Alrighty, so at our last meeting in February, I talked a lot about the intersection of Black history, of women's suffrage, and I made a commitment at that meeting that I was going to be amplifying the voices of some of the Black women's rights leaders that have been primarily whitewashed from that history. So I'm going to start with that tonight with Mary Church Terrell, who was born to former slaves in Memphis in 1963. She began her activism at age 29 in 1892 when a friend of hers was lynched by white business owners in the town that they all lived in because that Black business owner had the audacity to be successful. So they lynched him. She joined Ida B. Wells after that in anti-lynching campaigns for the next several years, but it was her belief that a critical component to ending racial discrimination would be by Black people advancing themselves through education, work, and community activism. That belief became the motto of the organization that she helped found in 1896, the National Association of Colored Women. The motto, lifting as we climb. And as president, she actively embraced and championed women's suffrage because she knew that she belonged, quote, to the only group in this country that has two such huge obstacles to surmount, both sex and race. She was a founding member, one of only 2 women of the NAACP, as well as a founder of the college alumni club later named the National Association of University Women. Though she was an active member of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, that was where she met Susan B. Anthony, she was one of the few black women allowed to attend, likely because of her friendship with some of the white leaders of that organization. And it gave her an opportunity to capitalize on. She spoke to them many times about including black women in the movement and including advancement of black women in that movement. The NAWSA did not allow black women to create their own chapters. So it was difficult for her, I'm sure, to be standing in front of a group of women who were accepting of her, but not her skin color. She continued to fight for integration, particularly in Washington, D.C., where she lived. She targeted restaurants through boycotts, pickets, and sit-ins. When she was refused service, she sued them. And that eventually led to a ruling that ended segregated eating places in Washington, D.C. in 1953. She lived long enough to see the Supreme Court deem separate but equal unconstitutional in their Brown v. Board of Education decision, and she died 2 months later, at the age of 90, on June 24th, 1954. A life well lived, Mary Church Terrell.
Thank you, Councilmember Bierman. Ward 2, Councilmember Carter.
Really just want to touch lightly on the coronavirus. We see, coronavirus in animals, and particularly cattle. We actually have a coronavirus vaccine in cattle. So I'm optimistic that there'll be a vaccine available for humans very rapidly. I think they're not that difficult to produce. I'm sure the testing will take time, but you can't overemphasize, at least when we're dealing with coronavirus infections in animals, the importance of washing your hands in disease transmission and not contaminating inanimate objects, things that you touch. So, I certainly hope we don't see the kind of outbreak in our region that there's been in other parts of the world, which could have a devastating effect on retail business, sales tax revenue, a lot of unforeseen things. But hopefully our federal government will take the necessary precautions to make sure that doesn't happen. One of my classmates in vet school, who is a veterinarian in El Reno, he and his wife took an 40th anniversary trip to Hawaii, and they are on the stranded Carnival's cruise ship off the coast of California. And they were on the front page of the Daily Oklahoman on Sunday, the Bon Tonglins. But it looks like they're using, I think, appropriate precaution. So that's, I think, comforting to me that we're doing the right thing. So, but definitely take great care in washing your hands and covering your mouth when you cough or sneeze. Thank you.
Second that. Not just when there's a viral epidemic, but all the time. Ward 3, Councilmember Bertrand.
Okay, so on the same topic, I read this earlier today, and I thought, I'm going to read that. I'm going to be a Kate. Okay, so this is the English translation of a post from an ICU physician in Bergamo, Italy, Dr. Danielle Maccini. It's not that long, but thought y'all might want to hear it. After much thought about whether and what to write about what is happening to us, I felt that silence was not responsible. I will therefore try to convey to people far from our reality what we are living in Bergamo in these days of COVID-19 pandemic. I understand the need not to create panic, but when the message of the dangerousness of what is happening does not reach people, I shudder. I myself watched with some amazement the reorganization of the entire hospital in the past week, when our current enemy was still in the shadows. The wards slowly emptied. Elective activities were interrupted. Intensive care were freed up to create as many beds as possible. All this rapid transformation brought an atmosphere of silence and surreal emptiness to the corridors of the hospital that we did not yet understand, waiting for a war that was yet to begin, and that many, including me, were not so sure would ever come with such ferocity. I still remember my night call a week ago when I was waiting for the results of a swab. When I think about it, my anxiety over one possible case seems almost ridiculous and unjustified now that I've seen what's happening. Well, the situation now is dramatic, to say the least. The war has literally exploded. and battles are uninterrupted day and night. But now that need for beds has arrived in all its drama. One after the other, the departments that had been emptied fill up at an impressive pace. The boards with the names of the patients, of different colors depending on the operating unit, are now all red. And instead of surgery, you see the diagnosis, which is always the damn same: bilateral interstitial pneumonia. Now, explain to me which flu virus causes such a rapid drama. And while there are still people who boast of not being afraid by ignoring directions, protesting because their normal routine is temporarily put in crisis, the epidemiological disaster is taking place, and there are no more surgeons, urologists, orthopedists. We are only doctors who suddenly become part of a single team to face this tsunami that has overwhelmed us. Cases are multiplying. We arrive at a rate of 15 to 20 admissions per day, all for the same reasons. The results of the swabs now come one after another, positive, positive, positive. Suddenly the ER is collapsing. Reasons for the access always the same: fever and breathing difficulties, fever and cough, respiratory failure. Radiology reports, always the same: bilateral interstitial pneumonia, bilateral interstitial pneumonia, bilateral interstitial pneumonia, all to be hospitalized. Someone already to be intubated and go to intensive care. For others, it's too late. Every ventilator becomes like gold. Those in operating theaters that have now suspended their non-urgent activity become intensive care places that did not exist before. The staff is exhausted. I saw the tiredness on faces that didn't know what it was despite the already exhausting workloads they had. I saw a solidarity of all of us who never failed to go to our internist colleagues to ask, "What could I do for you now?" Doctors who move beds and transfer patients, who administer therapies instead of nurses. Nurses with tears in their eyes because we can't save everyone, and the vital parameters of several patients at the same time reveal an already marked destiny. There are no more shifts, no more hours. Social life is suspended for us. We no longer see our families for fear of infecting them. Some of us have already become infected despite the protocols. Some of our colleagues who are infected also have infected relatives, and some of their relatives are already struggling between life and death. So be patient. You can't go to the theater, museums, or the gym. Try to have pity on the myriad of old people you could exterminate. We just try to make ourselves useful. You should do the same. We influence the life and death of a few dozen people. You with yours, many more. Please share this message. We must spread the word to prevent what is happening here and happening all over Italy. I finished by saying that I really don't understand this war on panic. The only reason I see is mask shortages. But there's no mask on sale anymore. We don't have a lot of studies, but is panic really worse than neglect and carelessness during an epidemic of this sort? I just found that when I read it earlier today, I was really, I don't know, I'm sure like many of you have been keeping up with it a lot, but I think that we all need to practice what Dr. Carter says here. Let's take this seriously, wash our hands, and I want to say thank you to Chief King for coming to Truman Primary this week and speaking with the kids about good personal hygiene in times of all the time, but especially now with coronavirus. And he also spoke about fire safety, and I called him at the very last minute, and he came right out and helped, and I really appreciate that. So with that, everybody practice good hand washing.
Thank you. Ward 4, Councilmember Hall.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to our city staff. There's been a significant amount of information passing back and forth between staff members and council members, and lots of questions. And, we're all trying to get this right and understand what's before us and what's best for the city going forward. So I really appreciate all of you taking the time and putting in the extra effort that I know has been demanded of you to provide information for us. So I'm grateful for the time that you take to help us be prepared. So thank you for all that you do, and especially right now when there's a lot of information that we're all trying to absorb. I'd also just like to comment on the length of discussions that we've been holding over the last several weeks and how important those are and how important it is to have feedback from the public, which we are hearing a lot from right now. And I think it should be apparent that we all really do have the best interests of Norman in our minds and trying to find the best way forward. And sometimes we disagree on how to get there and what the path is to get there, but I think I certainly respect where all of my colleagues are coming from and the way they think through and try to solve these problems. So I'm confident that we'll find our way ahead and hopefully be able to fund all these projects that are so important and maybe find ways to address some of the other projects that we keep saying important, like stormwater, and finding a way to help find the funding to address some of those needs as well. The next thing I wanted to point out was when we talk about quality of life projects and the kind of community that we want to be, I just want to give a shout out to the Sooner Theater Organization. I had the pure pleasure and joy of taking my granddaughter to her first play on Sunday to see The Little Mermaid. And we also had out-of-town guests here to be able to enjoy that production. And they were astonished when I pointed out to them that the cast was made up of middle school and high school students here in Norman. They thought it was at least a college-level class or cast of actors, or possibly professional or semi-professional a cast that was here. It was just an amazing performance, and the energy and the creativity that went into the performances and just the production, the costumes. It was just a magical experience and just made me really proud of all of the different organizations in Norman that work so hard to contribute to our quality of life and offer us these kinds of opportunities that we can share with our community, with our out-of-town guests, with our families. So way to go, Sooner Theater. Really looking forward to the next time that we can share the magic with our grandchildren. The last thing I want to say is we would love to have you all participate in the Second Friday Art Walk this coming Friday in historic downtown Norman. It's going to be from 6 to 9 as usual, with lots of different performance venues and the usual suspects along the way. So we hope you can take some time and enjoy our arts district in downtown Norman, and hopefully the weather will be beautiful. So thank you all.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilson.
We are not having our regular Ward 5 meeting this Saturday. It would be scheduled for this Saturday. It's the start of spring break, has nothing to do with pandemics. However, it doesn't hurt. But also, hand sanitizer. Make sure you use that. Another important thing I would like to talk about is we had talked last year about a prescribed burn that might be happening with the forestry department. Chief King has let me know that the conditions seem right over the next week or so to do that. So you might be seeing some smoke out by the Lake Thunderbird area, just west of the lake, and the words escape me, the wildlife area. So just be aware. As always, you feel free to call the fire department if you have concerns about smoke, but just be aware that that is happening. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Scanlon.
I'm going to tell you about my aunt. My aunt was born in the teens, if you will, the 19s. Grew up in the 20s. Became a school teacher because that's what women did in those days. But she wasn't content. She got a private pilot's license and an open cockpit biplane. She backpacked through Europe and South America during the 30s. When World War II started, she enlisted because her brothers did. And she was chosen for the first officer training class for women. Was the shortest person in the class. At 5 feet tall, she was just minimally qualified to be in the Army. Because she was the shortest, she was picked as senior. Her serial number was L1 in the Army. She led the first contingent of women other than nurses overseas, worked for General Eisenhower planning the D-Day invasion, went on to become director of the Women's Army Corps, and held that job for 6 years before the Women's Army Corps was dissolved and women were totally integrated into the Army, which is something that she advocated. She held the rank of colonel. When I was promoted to colonel in the Air Force, I was honored to wear her insignia. It really touches me to this day, and I still covet that insignia. When asked what the secret of success was, she just said simply, you do your thing. And remember that you don't have to be 6 feet tall and be a man to have a brain. Inspiring for me. Second thing I've already complimented Public Works, so I won't do that anymore, but I will talk to utilities. As you probably know, we received a grant essentially to do a proof of concept in how to reuse our water, to essentially take water that goes through our water reclamation plant and put it back into Lake Thunderbird. That's a big deal, and I was interested to see just how that might be done, because I was told along the way that we already had equipment in place at the water reclamation facility to do a lot of this work. So I went down and looked, and it was very interesting. But what I learned along the way, just in walking the grounds, are just a few things like the management down there. Everybody opts in. Everybody keeps track of what the progress is. Everybody has a stake, if you will, and they truly do. And one of the manifestations of the stake is that by switching out certain switching units down there to something more efficient, we save on the order of, I think it's $10,000 a month in utility bills. That's an unsung contribution by city staff, by the workers down in the trenches. That's a big deal. Another utilities event, I'm a sucker for big trucks, big red trucks, big trash trucks. And so there was an expo last week that our utilities people actually staged. It was a Texas and Oklahoma combined event, but we organized it. Quite something to see. And I enjoyed looking at the big trucks and the trailers. But in talking to some of our people again, I learned that by the simple substitution of a certain type of trailer, and don't ask me to describe it particularly, but by using that down at the transfer station, we ended up saving about $100,000 a year in processing costs there. Again, an unsung contribution by the city staff in the trenches. That's a big deal. My hat's off, at least at the conclusion of this meeting, to utilities. Thank you, Ken. The last comment I would make, I am going to have a ward meeting next Monday night, the 16th at 7 o'clock at the 12th Avenue Rec Center. I just really didn't have any other time to do it, and I'm not going to let the virus scare us off. We will take whatever precautions we might, but 7 o'clock, 12th Avenue Rec Center, Monday night. Anybody's welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Scott.
Thank you. As always, thank all of you. Thank you, staff, for your fabulous work. Thank you all for being here and for watching at home. I have two announcements. One of them is a Sutton Wilderness cleanup on Sunday, March 22nd at 2 p.m. Councilmember Scanlon and I will be co-hosting, so I encourage and invite all of you to join and clean up our beautiful, beautiful Sutton Wilderness Trail in Ward 8, fabulous Ward 8. And the only other thing is the ward meeting will be at the end of this month, which is a Sunday. Forget exactly, not the 22nd, but the following Sunday, the last Sunday of the month at its place it's always at, Fire Station 7, in the middle of fabulous Ward 8 from 1:30 to 3 p.m., and we will discuss census stuff. So thank you so much, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. I would just say a couple things. The water reclamation facility is really something that I would encourage all citizens to go take a look at. It's, I think, tied with the water treatment plant for being the most important building in the entire city. It would be a real disaster if the water reclamation plant were to go down for any amount of time. So just imagine no toilets, no showers, no sinks could run for hours. But we do tours of that facility. It may not always smell great, but it is worth it to go see how it actually works and the process and the amount of investment that the citizens of Norman have voted to put into that facility over the years is significant and worth going to check out where your tax dollars have gone. Also located in Ward 7, so proud of that. I am looking to have a Ward 7 meeting potentially on, I think, either Wednesday the 25th or Sunday the 29th. Not nailed that down yet, but to discuss things like Norman Forward, the discussions we've been having tonight and the past few weeks about a potential bond package, talking about the census, and among other important issues. There's a few road projects in Ward 7 that'll be coming up in the next year that voters have approved. And so just getting some general updates about what's going on currently at City Hall. So again, looking at potentially the Sunday the 29th or Wednesday the 25th for that one. So other than that, though, I really appreciate the comments from my colleagues up here. I appreciate all the work our city staff does to keep everything running for us. So we have a lot of big issues we're dealing with, and we need all the help we can possibly get from the public to make sure we make the best decisions possible going forward. So I look forward to these discussions. As I mentioned, next Tuesday here we'll be continuing our discussion about Norman Forward and municipal complex potential bond funding for those issues. So I look forward to those discussions, and we will see you all next time. Thank you.